Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's topic will be on the FDOTSS3 Template Design Basics. This is part one of a two-part webinar series. The first one will be recorded and posted today, and then the second one will be posted sometime after the FLUG session. I believe it's the week after the FLUG, the last week in November. I just wanted to basically cover a couple of things here first. Most of what we'll be talking about today is covered in the new course guide for the design and 3D modeling in FDOTSS3. That can be found on our training website. Here's the page link, and you can go. Eventually, I'm not sure if it's going to be posted today, but it'll be posted within the next week or so, the new training guide. This new training guide for the road design and 3D modeling has three new numbers. Replaced the old corridor modeling and roadway design basics and roadway design advanced. We now have one manual that will cover the design and modeling, and then another manual that does the plan development. And you'll be able to find those out on the website. And they'll have this cover page that looks something like this. The chapter that we're focused on today is Chapter 5, Template Design. And the reason we started in Chapter 5 is because template design that's carrying over from FDOTSS2 and SS3 are similar, but we wanted to cover the differences and some of the highlights between the two. And also, we hadn't done a specific training class or webinar on specific to template design, and we wanted to make sure we had a couple of webinars recorded, not only for old corridor modeling, or the older corridor modeling users in SS2 or existing corridor modeling users in SS2, and the new SS3 design and modeling users or projects. So in today's session, this is kind of a bullet list of what I'd like to cover. First of all, I want to open up the new FDOTSS3 Template Library and show you some of the changes versus SS2. And then I want to cover we actually developed a conversion utility to convert your SS2 project template libraries into SS3. A lot of things have changed as far as the features and point definition styles. And so if you try to bring up an old ITL file in the new software, you're going to get nothing but white lines. And so we need to convert those first, and our utility works pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that. I'm going to focus then in on the project template library and the create template dialog, as well as the template library organizer. And that's what most people are. If you're using corridor modeling today, you're familiar with all these terms. If you're new to corridor modeling and FDOTSS3, then this will be good basic knowledge for you. And then I want to talk about the really what I call the just top 10 practices for template design and for your project template designs. So let me get over into the into our workspace, and this is FDOTSS3 version 1. Our menus have changed a little bit, and if you watched the webinar last week, I think we went over some of the changes as far as that goes. As far as templates go, the template library is going to be launched from the Civil Tools task. So if you look at your task, you've got Civil Tools, Main Classic, the Plans Development. In the Civil Tools, there is all the sections now for anything that you're doing with the design and modeling. And the template library can be launched. Create Template Dialog can be launched from the this Create Template icon here. And so The first thing I wanted to talk about is what's changed. So let me just go back and open up the FDOTSS2 template library, or actually the new FDOTSS3 template library. And once I navigate to the right place, it's located in the same location. For new users, it's always been in the GEOPAK corridor of the workspace. So wherever your server is, look in the GEOPAK folder, then the corridor folder, and within there is the F.SS3 ITL file. And traditionally, we've always placed it there. Depending upon the workstation version, it's been renamed. So if you were in F.2010, it's called F.2010.ITL. And if you're in F.SS2, it's called F.SS2.ITL, and so now, of course, following suit, this is the F.SS3 ITL. And kind of want to go through some of the changes. It's organized very similar. However, we've streamlined it a little bit. So you've got your components and all the different components here that you normally would have, but there's not as many folders to travel into. So we've tried to combine like things. So for example, you've got a travel lane left, a travel lane right, where you've got the base and the pavement put together. So you don't have to worry about putting some of these things together. There's, for as far as sidewalks, you've got two things to pick from. So in the SS3 version, sometimes there was 3 or 4 folders to get into in order to get to the components that you wanted to. So what we've tried to do is make it a little streamlined so that if you need a buffer line, you just go to the components buffer, and there's a left and right buffer right there in the folder. Some of them have some additional folders, like in here, if you wanted individual components, you can go, well, here's as far as pavement goes, there's a travel lane, but if you wanted a shared use path, which is specific, you could pick in that folder as well. Or if you need a specific ramp, then it's under pavement ramp, and so we've organized it that way as far as the components go. We've added in a few things here for like gravity walls. Now we have a cut fill gravity wall that we didn't have before, a regular cut gravity wall, and then a fill gravity wall. So you can either use the combined one that works in either cut or fill, or pick one, the fill or cut, as far as gravity walls go. There are some other, let's see, there's a standard barrier wall here that no longer needs some of the, like we had these flyouts here before that were a little hard to manage. So based on some of our project experience, we now have one here that it's a variable wall, and it varies, according to whether or not the profile grade lines vary on either side. This wall will change its configuration. So, I mean, these are just some of the things that we've added in from either project experience or people calling in with questions and that kind of thing. The end conditions folder has been cleaned up, or it's been streamlined to where now we just have a parts folder and a few of the basic end conditions. So, for example, this end condition is just strictly cut fill, and all of the decision tree, if you will, of which one to use when. This is a cut fill with a right-of-way constraint, so everything has to fall within the right-of-way, but it still uses the same decision tree as far as cut and fill slopes. And then we have the standard cut and fill with a clear zone, and this clear zone can be adjusted, and then it has the decision tree coming off of the clear zone, and of course it also has a 2-to-1 with a guardrail. So for the urban high-speed facilities that need the clear zone and also the guardrail, you have that one as well. And then we also put in here a standard, what we call search line, or what you may have heard some of the people talk about, trigger lines, and basically this is what we use to turn on and off different components in composite templates. So there's a basic one here. You can just always go grab it and add it to your template if you need to. I'm going to skip over the examples. There's existing feature templates, well, let me go back to components. There's ditches and berms now, which are now within the components. And basically there's a common ditch, left and right. And if you look at these are going to vary in horizontal and vertical. So it depending upon where this point is, the ditch is going to vary. You could also uh, add a point control to the bottom of the ditch in the front, and it's going to vary the depth of the ditch and the width of the ditch that way. It also has the V ditch component placed in there, so if for some reason you can't fit a flat bottom ditch, it will automatically go to a V ditch, and that's usually when you're widening out and your tie to ground is close to wherever your begin ditch point is. It'll go to a V, and so we could also put it in a flat, but basically we tried to create some common components that you would use on projects. And then the same thing with berms. We have basic berms now, where before we had a really complex ditch berm situation. Now we just have this standard situation here where depending upon where the surface is, and I'll cover some of this, you're going to get either a berm with a ditch or just a berm, depending upon where the surface is. And I'll cover what some of these other dialogues are here in a second. I'm just trying to basically cover the changes. Um, the typical sections, well, let me just keep continuing down the list here. I'm going to skip over the examples for now. Existing feature templates. These are basically very basic templates for building an existing features model, which we'll get into in one of the future webinars. But we have a specific folder now here that if you need to show the depth of the existing asphalt, you'll come pick an existing feature template to basically show depth on a terrain, on a existing asphalt terrain boundary. We'll cover that a little bit in future webinars. Existing pavement slope. This is for doing like an evaluation of trying to find out what the existing slopes are on a project, like a resurfacing project, and you've got to evaluate what the existing slopes are. And this template is developed to work with a standard style sheet report, so that as soon as you use this template on a corridor to evaluate the existing slopes, you can go to the corridor reports and actually get a report that you can plot out of the existing slopes all along the project within 2 lanes. And this template has a 2-lane evaluation, but it'd be awfully easy to extend it by just copying it onto itself and adding additional lanes. It's really just replicating the same component out to other lanes. So that's all we have for really existing slope analysis. We've kind of we had a lot of sophisticated analysis components out there that we removed from the ITL, the SS3 ITL, mainly because it was hard for people to learn it, and it just wasn't being utilized that often. But this one I think will do most everything that you need to do on evaluating the existing pavement slopes on resurfacing projects anyhow. And then we have some a new folder here, just like the existing feature templates was streamlined and new. We also have linear templates. Linear templates are really just half templates pushed along a baseline. It could be an edge of pavement line, could be a curb return line, it could be a median line, and you just need to build off a corridor off of that one line. So what you see is kind of what you get there. This is an outside lane with type F and a sidewalk, and then this is a paved shoulder with and you could add an end condition to the end of this, copy it into your file, so on and so forth. So we've just provided some common linear templates that you would use on projects. And of course, you could always start with something like this and delete off the pavement if you needed to, or delete off the sidewalk and add something else in here like a barrier wall, but at least it gives you something to start with. Now let's talk about median conditions. The median conditions folder has also been streamlined to where you have in this folder one median set per entry. So this is the traffic separator, and it no longer has all of the traffic separators. It just has the most common one, type 1, option 1, out here in the median conditions. This is a paved, unpaved shoulder median condition. This is a paved shoulder median condition. If I turn these point names off. And then you have a resurfacing, reconditioning median. This was one that was out there before, where you've just got to basically reshape the shoulders in the ditch, and you're going to be doing resurfacing on the lanes outside of the median. And then there are standard type E curb medians, and of course, you know, these have the variable lanes. So as you're adding left turn lanes, these things will change, whether you're doing it from the left or the right. Of course, they all work this way, so that, you know, depending upon which side you're targeting for that varying taper line, it will automatically stretch to it. And they all have trigger lines, and they all are basically component sets that you can drop in on a template. And then there's a crossover median, which is a standard median. Now the crossover median now has a couple of extra control points here. This is for basically controlling the crowning across an intersection instead of trying to be crowned about the middle. We know that, you know, when you got a traffic separator far to the left on one side of the intersection and far to the right on the other side of the intersection, that it can't crown down the middle because it has to transition that pavement slope. So we have these extra points in here, and these can be targeted on either horizontal features or point controls or something like that. Not to worry, where I said this traffic separator only has one type, if you wanted to use a different type, they're all in this traffic separator folder individually. So if you want to use a different one from the type 1, option 1, you can come here and pick a traffic separator or more than one, but we no longer have them all in one set template. They're individualized now, and that allows you to kind of pick and choose the ones that you want. It'll just make building the median conditions a lot easier. Surface templates. Surface templates are kind of like the existing feature templates, where only these are proposed surfaces. So you might have a terrain boundary that represents an intersection, you know, built, and you need to apply what's called a surface template in SS3. You would come over here and pick the pavement asphalt, and now what you're doing is giving that what's the word I'm looking for? It's an intersection boundary that's not you know, a square or something standard, and you need to apply depth to it. So an irregular shape boundary is what I'm trying to say. You could then apply this constant pavement depth to that irregular shape of an intersection boundary and achieve the depth components there. Same thing with concrete and a shared use path, shoulder pavement, and sidewalk. So we've just got a few of them out there. Miscellaneous pavement, I guess I missed that one. So that's what the surface templates are for in SS3. Now, typical sections, we went back to the static typical sections that we had released way back in 2010, about 4 years ago, because we found that most people wanted to start with just the basic template that didn't have any dynamics in the middle. No longer do we have any switches. There are some additional null points out here for like handles, but that's pretty much it. The only thing that you can turn on and off with the display rule is this handrail. Everything else has been taken off. So we only have one curb type in the median and one curb type out on the outside of the pavement. If your project varies from a type F and a type E, you'll just have to go in here and modify the curb by deleting this curb and going into the components and placing the curb that you want. And so some of that stuff we'll be we'll be talking about anyway in the rest of this session. But so that is the differences. We streamlined the, I don't know if I have it in here, but we streamlined the template library to where it was 17 megs, and now it's down to 7 megs, I believe. It's about a third of the size. Well, not quite a third, but it's been streamlined quite a bit. Okay. So let's see if I go back to, so that covers what's changed in a template library. Let's talk about the template library conversion utility. So if I close out of here, in the workspace, in the FDOT menu now, there is under roadway a FDOT modeling, corridor modeling conversion tools. And if you want to convert a specific like ALG or IRD, you can click off of there. But if you want the main conversion utility, you can pick it this way. And all you have to do is simply go out here and do a file open, and it's going to look for the ALG, the IRD, or the ITL of a previous project. So I've got an old example project here, Brian's State Road 887 project. And there is a ITL file out here called construction87.itl, but it's in the SS2. It's in the SS2 format. As a matter of fact, if I were to try to open it now, if I bring up the template library organizer or template library create template dialog, and I go to open, and I go look in this DE projects, and I go down and find Brian's project here, and I go to roadway, and this is the SS2. If I go ahead and choose open, all these templates are going to come in white, and nothing is really going to be to standards. So that is because we've changed our features, so they had to be changed for SS3. So this idea of converting an old template library to a new template library is going to become very important for migrating your projects forward in SS3. And that's why we came up with this corridor modeling conversion utility. And all you'll do is do file open, you'll select the ITL file, and it's going to automatically create a new ITL file by converting what was the old styles into new features. So anything that had a style, not a style constraint, but a drafting standard style in SS2, I'm already forgetting the terms, has now been converted to a SS3 civil feature. And the civil features for components are different than the civil features for points, and so on and so forth, which I'll show you. So basically that just converted everything, and it utilizes a XML file that says if the point had a definition, a style definition of baseline station tick in SS2, then that's going to be a template miscellaneous. So we did a mapping of common style names in SS2 to feature definitions in SS3. And what you'll see is if you were to scroll down this list, you'll see there's point definitions and there's component definitions here. So if it was an excess traffic separator in SS2, it becomes a traffic separator in SS3. And then it's also showing the path of where that's actually located, and so on and so forth. But when you get done, it basically converts that ITL file into an SS3 version. There are some point exceptions out here. Let me cancel this for now. There are point exceptions where there was an old definition and they couldn't find a new definition. Like in this case, there was a constraint problem with the guardrail double face existing, and it didn't know what to use, so it picked this template miscellaneous. And then components, again, there's some constraint issues here that could be resolved. So you can, if you find one that you need to change, like this one here, I would have to really kind of go in here and see what these constraints were really trying to do, but they could all be resolved by these fields down here. So you could pick what you thought was an old berm, and now it needs to be a ditch slope or something like that. So we probably don't have a berm definition or berm feature, so you could just pick a ditch slope or a ditch line or something like that, and then hit apply, and it would convert that one that way. And you could select multiples, I believe. I haven't worked with this that much, but you know, as you need to convert, you'll probably learn more about this than I do at this point. So, and we are supporting it. There are a couple people here supporting it. One of our developers and then a couple of our support people that can help with this. And I'm sure I'll be helping as well. But then as soon as you choose to close, you can either file save at this point, and it will save that ITL file. And then if you close, then you'll be able to go into that same one and say file open, and you'll see there's a new ITL. Choose open, and now notice everything is colorized, and it's using the new feature definitions for the components. If you look at the points, it's using the new feature definitions for the points. Any of the old style constraints are now using the current feature constraints. So it's been converted successfully, with the exception of those few exceptions. So that is the conversion utility. All right, so now let's talk about basically your own project. This is where we're kind of going to get into really the new training of template design and so on and so forth. Whenever you first get into a SS3 session, what you're going to find is if you launch the Create Template dialog, since there's no template in your project, it's going to automatically be loading the f.itl file, like what we were looking for to begin with. Let me get to the file. So you see it's going to automatically load this. So one of the first things we have people do is do a file new and create a new template library. This is your project library, and we usually want you to store this in your project directory. So in this case, I would have a 224, and then I could put it in the roadway folder. And usually what in the past we've given it a name called like SR whatever, 61, whatever the project was, or let me just call it SR99 just for the time being. And it basically creates this empty project file out here. And then from there you would do file new, create a folder, file new, create another folder, and you would basically rename these folders for things that you want to drag into it. Like in this case, it might be components. And then this one might be templates. Okay, and you would always have to do that for a project ITL file. Well, one of the things that we noticed in SS3 is that there's no, in SS2 there used to be a configuration in preference in that main corridor modeling dialog where you could point to your active project ITL file when you first got into the project and save that as a preference. But in SS3 there is no such little preference dialog for saving preferences, so it automatically loads the first time you get into a session. It automatically loads the f.ss3, and you'd always have to go back and do a file open in order to get your project ITL file. So we kind of put our heads together, and what we decided was if you keep in your project folder a ITL file with the same name as the project, then we can launch that ITL file instead of the f.ss3.itl file. What does that mean? Well, that means that if you have in your project, in the roadway folder, an ITL file that is named the same as your project folder, then we can default load this ITL file on startup, and every time you get into that active design file, it will look in the directory for this ITL file, and you won't have to always go back and load up and do a file open on it. It kind of works the same as a save preference. And so what we're recommending then is when you start a project, since we always are going to have basically the same folder names and so on and so forth, then what we've got out here is in the FDOTSS3 GEOPAK Corridor folder, there's an empty project ITL file. So all you'd have to do is right click on here and copy it, and then go to your project folder and go to the roadway directory, and then copy paste and paste that empty project ITL file out there, and then just rename it. I already have this one, so I'll delete this one. And then you just rename it the project number, and you'll be ready to go. So it's 22049555201. And now I'm ready to go. So the next time I get in, since I've already loaded up the other one, it's still trying to bring up this I1. But if I were to just come in fresh, it would automatically load up this 224 ITL file. And because I copied it over from the empty project one, I'm already got my folders here ready to drag things into. So it's very important that you create your own project ITL file. And now in SS3, we're going to try to create the standard that you create the ITL file with the same name as the project number. Okay? So that's what that bullet's for. Get this to show up here. All right, the next thing is the create template dialog and template library organizer. So once you're in the create template dialog, oh, by the way, there's another way to launch the template dialog, since we always find ourselves getting in and out when we're doing corridor modeling or 3D modeling. What we did was create a function key that will automatically open the template library, so you don't even need to look for it. It's the F12 key. If you're in our workspace and your tasks are unpinned and you just want to look, you're trying to figure out what template am I doing here? I got a little error. If you hit your F12 key, it automatically loads your active template library. So that's how you can get that up. Now let's talk about, I don't have a template in here, so but basically the template library organizer is kind of designed such that you have a list of all your templates over here, and we'll get into more of this, a preview of it here. The actual template editing session usually shows up in the middle, but I don't have a template to look at, so I don't really have anything. And then some other things about it, which I'll cover once we get some templates. But I want to talk about the next main thing about the template library or template design, and that is that you should always start with templates from the FDOT.ITL file. If you're going to be working on a DOT project or even a project that does any kind of DOT standards, you're really making more work for yourself by trying to create templates from scratch, because there's a whole plethora of templates out there for you to use. And if you just go to the FDOT or the Tools Template Library Organizer, it brings up a window like here that's resizable, and it's in its own kind of dialog here in SS3. And all you have to do is this is the current one this is your project template library, and what you want to do is go locate the FDOT template library. By now we all know that it's in your server GEOPAK Corridor ITL file. Then once you have that up, then you can borrow anything that's in here into your project. So for example, maybe I want to get maybe my project is a 6-lane divided. It follows very similar to the way the typical 20 is in the PPM, which is an urban type condition with 6 lanes. The outside lane is sloped at 3%, and there's a sidewalk that's varying. It could even be a shared use path or something up against the right of way or right against the back of curb. Whatever, it's a good example to start with. So what I would do is grab that and put it in my components folder. And now you see that I've got that same template is now in my project to start with. And then I might also need, for example, this is a resurfacing project, so if I go to pavement, I can get all this resurfacing stuff and put that over in my components folder. And now I've got all the resurfacing. And then let's say I don't know what end condition I'm going to need, so I can just go to end conditions, grab everything here, and put it in my end conditions folder. Or if I want to, I know I'm going to need probably this trigger line, so I can, one of the things about this template library organizer is notice how it opens all those folders if you drag it this way. If you try to drag it around it, you can kind of come back into it. So I'm going to just place that one there. And then you can close these up. But it's just a drag and drop operation. So now you see I've got the parts and the standard trigger line. Maybe I also want to use this standard cut and fill so I don't have to put them all in at the same time. This is what I was saying. If you come outside of this window and try to stay around the border line of it, and then come up this way, then you can come right in on the folder and it won't open those up. And now I've got those as well. Maybe you need a linear template like this outside pave lane. You can do the same thing. You can kind of come around this way and just come up and put that in your linear templates. And maybe you don't know which surface template you need, so you could at least get the pavement asphalt one and drag this and put it in your surface templates. So now I should have that pavement asphalt there. Now if you somehow drag it on the wrong place, let's say I put this one over here, this doesn't allow you to kind of move it. At least it didn't used to. I guess now it does. Well, it copies it in this file, but like it won't let you move it until you get out of this template library organizer. And then automatically, as soon as you try to get out, it's going to say, do you want to save all these changes to your project template library? Yes. And now if you look in your project template library, you're going to have everything that you basically dragged, that you started with from the FDOT template library. And then this is where you can do other things like I can delete this if I want to here. If I wanted to move this one over into my components folder, I can move it now up to there. And now it went out of there and it's up to here. So that is the template library organizer. And let's look at how this the rest of the create template dialog is kind of organized here. Whenever you double click on a template, it's going to put a red box around it. That red box means it's active for editing. I can click on any template and have a preview of it over here and see what it looks like, but until I get the red box around it, I'm not editing it. And this is so that you can see other templates and also so that you can drag these other templates onto your active, the active template that you're working on. Okay, so that's one thing to note about this folder structure over here. The other thing to note about it is that there's two tabs down here, and these are really important for doing template editing. Most people, when you first get into doing template design, you don't even know that this active template's even here, and I'll get calls, I'll go, well, flip over to the active template tab. Where's that? It's right below the list. Where's that? And what that really is, this is like, if you can think of this as these are folders of all your templates. When you get into a specific active template, this is all the stuff that's specific to that template. So you got a whole bunch of things about this particular template, like all the points that are in there, all the components in there, all the end condition branches, if there are any, display rules, parametric constraints, all this stuff. This is all specific to this one template. So if I were to go over to another template, let's say I go to something that's like just more basic, like an overlay component. Double click on that one. Now that's active. If I go to the active template and look at there's only 4 points in this template. Well, that's pretty obvious. There's only one component in this template. The other thing about the active template tab is that it shows not only relationships, but it also allows you to go in and like see from another point of view as far as what's free, what's fixed, what the point names are. You know, if you've got one that's just a L underbar pavement overlay and it doesn't follow our LT formatting, or maybe it's points that need to be the right is on the wrong side of the name. You wouldn't normally see that, especially in really complex templates. You're not going to be able to see all that text. But if you go to this list view, you'll be able to see a lot of that kind of things. All your parametric constraints for all the points, which you don't know what they are yet, but for those that do, they're all listed over here. And anything that you want to change, you can double click and actually change these values right here. And I tell people to use common labels on common points for things. Like if I wanted all this thickness to be changed at one time, I'd want to make sure the labels are the same. Like in this case, I would probably want to make sure that this label says overlay pavement thick for the left, but if I want it to match the same as this label over here, I would change it. And that way, if I go to my what's called parametric constraint labels, all I have now is pavement thickness. If I want to change that depth at the same time, I would make sure it has the same label. So now I can set that minus 0.5, say, choose OK, and now both points change their constraints, not just one at a time. It's kind of silly to do that. You might as well just edit the points one at a time. So that's the active template tab. I find it very valuable. I also find it, for example, in one of these, like if you go to the active template tab for a PPM type template, I like to see these parent-child relationships, where that's what the plus sign means. So, for example, anything that has anything that's underneath one of these others means that there's a parent-child relationship. And I'm really big on parent-child relationships, because if I want to turn on or off a particular set of components, like let's say I need to turn off all of this at one time. I'm going through an intersection that doesn't need a curb, doesn't need a sidewalk, and so what I would do is I would make sure that this curb has all of this as a child. That way, if I apply a rule to this curb, everything gets applied to that. So where I would start doing that is I would come over to the very last component, and I would make sure that the parent of that component is the sidewalk, and then I would make sure that the sidewalk is a child of the curb. And then what happens is over here, if you look now, you see this type F now has a plus sign, and the sidewalk is now a child of that, and the sidewalk buffer is a child of that. So if I decide to turn off in a rule this, I get all that turned off as well. And obviously I missed a couple of things, because I would also want to make sure that the base is a child of this curb. And then I would want to make sure that this is a child, well, it already is a child of the handrail, so I would pick the handrail, and it's a child of the handrail test. So once I find the handrail test, I could do the same thing over here. If I don't even have to pick the component, if I just want to double click on it over here, I can also bring up the properties of this, and then I can say make this a child of the sidewalk as well. And once I get all those relationships, then you'll see that everything is now closed up under this curb type F. And if I do a on display, if I apply a rule to that curb, I'm going to get the same rule applied to all the children. So I'm big on the active template tab, the parent-child relationships on common components that you want to apply rules and things like that to, and organizing, basically organizing your template and all your components with these active template component folders, if you will. Let's see, what else about the template? Let me give you some more information about this dialog itself from new people. So you notice that I keep turning on and off point names. Well, obviously, when you get a lot of components in here, your point name text, which is not controllable, it's basically hard-coded. And until somebody tells me otherwise, I'll just keep saying it is hard-coded. You can't change the size of it. You can't change the font of it. You can't. All you can basically do is turn it on and turn it off. But it is the point name that you assign to that particular point, which is good for giving you a visual. But the other thing is, if you don't have that on, you can always hover over it, and it's still going to tell you what the point name is, and this will tell you what the component name is. and this will tell you what the component name is. It'll also give you the constraints that are on it. So there's a lot of information just by hovering over these components in the active view here that you can see. It gives you, of course, the name of the template. If you have components that have rules on them, then you can do this display all, and it will basically display all the components. It'll just show them as dashed. Like, for example, there's a component between there. I don't know if it'll show up because it's an end condition. It's got a do not construct on it, but that's not really a good example. But trust me, if you check that box, it'll display everything that's in there. The other thing is this constraints view, and this constraints view is very important for editing or troubleshooting, because without having to get into the point properties dialog, I can kind of hover over each and every point on my template and find out how it's constrained. And it's really simple. It has this little, there's two constraints on every point. There should be two constraints on just about every point. And depending upon this little symbol here, it tells me which ones, what are the constraints that are on it. So I can read this right now and find out that this point over here is constrained horizontally in slope from this point over here, because I see the arrow and I see the horizontal symbol and I see the slope symbol, where this point is controlled from that point above it horizontally and vertically, because that's a horizontal and that's a vertical. And if I open up this just to prove that that's exactly what's happening, you see that this says the constraint 1 is horizontal from the pavement crown at a zero horizontal offset, and that's meaning that this is directly below that and it doesn't vary horizontally. The second constraint is that it's vertically constrained a half a foot below that point. So that's exactly what that's showing. So once you get more and more familiar with it, you'll find that this is it can be valuable, or you can just continue to just open the point properties and see what it's doing that way. I mean, there's lots of different ways to see how your points are constrained, which we'll get into probably in the next session. But let's see, what else is there? There's the preview button. When you let's make a composite template here real quick. So I'm going to go over to my templates folder, this corridor templates folder. I'm going to do a right click and choose new template. And so now it creates a new template out here. I'm just going to call this a resurfacing template, and I'll just use 98 as an example. And now this is the active view to start drawing in. So the one thing I said is to try to use the FDOT components whenever you're creating templates, but also be sure that you're going and using tools options. And you want to use the FDOT preferences, because what happens when you do FDOT preferences is you're going to get the affixes the same way that we basically use them. And it's also going to snap to the nearest tenth of a foot in the grid, so that you have a closer snap ratio. It's kind of like a grid lock, so you're not just, it's easier to snap to points if you have this on a 0.1 than it is if you have it 0. You won't ever find anything. All right. So then it's very simple. All you have to do then is I brought over all these resurfacing components. So the first thing I'm going to do is, well, let me bring up my dynamic settings, because I want to always have this open to see if this affixes need to be applied or not. All right, and then like if I need an overlay template, I can just come over here and I'm going to snap it to the 0, 0 point to begin with. And I don't want affixes turned on, because these actually already have the affixes applied to them. Anything that has a left or a right in the name, the affixes have been applied. But if it doesn't, then you'll need to apply affixes. So that's something to know. So I'm going to check the apply affixes, and I'll drag over the right and put it in the middle, and it automatically places that component in this resurfacing template. And then if I want an overlay on the left-hand side, I can also build it that way. And when it snaps to one another, it will turn white. So the two greens will become one, and it will basically turn white. If it doesn't for some reason, Like if I do a Control Z, and if I drag this over and I miss it like that, then you can do just what I did. You can do Control Z or Control R, actually redo will put it back. And then you can right click and there's a move option and you can zoom in and move it to where it does turn white. And then once you do that, you just have to merge the points. If you do a if you do a move, you need to merge. If you just drag and drop it, it will do the merge automatically. Okay, so that's good to know. Now I'm going to put on a milling layer on the bottom of this. So I'm going to grab the right one and I'm going to drag it till it snaps to that. And because those are common, I don't have to merge when I drag. But if I did a move, I would have to merge. So I'm going to place that one there. And then I'm going to get an overbuild and place it in the same place. And you see that we've organized these so that you can very easily put them together to make your own template. Okay. And every time I can choose a fit, and it will fit all of the components within that view. If you use the shift key, it changes the vertical exaggeration. If you use the control key with your mouse, that is, it'll change the horizontal exaggeration. So you can get it to fit however you want. Now I could continue and add like a widening over here and drag that and place the widening component there and drag the widening component over here. Or I could say, you know, after that I'm going to need a shoulder and a curb, so there's probably a linear template out there that does that. So instead of just continuing to build on these separate components, if I do Control Z, I can find the linear component which doesn't have affixes associated with it, so I would apply that. And then I could just drag it, and while I'm dragging it, I can choose to mirror it. And then I could place it there, and now I've basically done the same thing on both sides with all those components. The only thing is that my outside lane is probably too wide, so all I'd have to do is edit the component by double-clicking on the point, and then changing the width and say I need my widening width to be a foot to begin with, and fix it that way. And then I could change this also and set this to be a foot that way. And if you wanted to change the slope, you could change the slope. You notice that was at 3%. And that's how simple it is to build a template. And again, if you fit it, then if I needed to put end conditions on here, I could come over to my end conditions folder and I could just grab the standard end conditions and just drag it with the mirror option. Notice that the mirror is darkened over here where reflect and mirror. You could basically reflect and mirror at the same time. So I'm going to place those on the unpaved shoulder point. Let me Control Z. I didn't like the way that placed in there, so let me try it again. I'm going to drag and drop this and put it on the end and merge it with that point right there. And I don't know why the other one is not there. I guess I don't know, that was weird. Let's see, if I drag this one and turn off the mirror and turn on reflect, place it there and merge it with the left one. Okay. Display point names. Now you see I've got right underbars on that side and left underbars on that side because of the affixes. The same thing with my with this. The other thing I wanted to point out here is that notice how all my points are white text and all my end conditions are red text. And that is that's very important because you want essentially all of your backbone points to not use this option here of use feature name override. The reason for that is that you will get a crisscrossing components created because what it's trying to do is join by common feature name overrides. Bottom line is you want all white text. If you're using, for example, if you look at one of your templates and you have red text, it's because you're using this feature called use feature name override. See how I have red text now? And that's going to cause you problems. So even in SS2, if you have any of that, except for these outside points that you want to use feature name override on, the difference being is that these outside slopes have like a right cut as a common name to use. Rather than using the point name to connect, it uses this override name to connect. And I can't think of any other case outside of maybe some inside lane transitioning where you would ever want to connect points on a template to one another. Like you never would want to connect this point to that point, and that's what happens sometimes. So whenever you have a situation where you have red points like that, you can either go into each of the points and uncheck this use feature name override, or you can go to this tool here and go to the apply feature name override. It will bring up a list of everything that has a duplicate name or that has a feature override name, and you can override it right here. So what you can do is just select the ones that are showing up that you don't want, and then basically blank it out and choose apply. And what that will do is it will turn that feature name override off. So it didn't work there because I changed my focus on the selection set. But if I want to make this one blank and then just choose apply and close, now that point turned white again. All right. One of the other things is you always want to make sure that anything you drag into your templates is constrained to something. I don't care what it is. It can even be an end condition. It can be, a gravity wall. So let me just grab something over here in the linear templates. Like let's say I'm going to do something else with this one over here. So notice how this template now has a green point here and a green point here. And the points are all based on the number of constraints. So let's say I take the constraint off of this and choose apply. You're going to see I've got a yellow point, a green point, and then of course all the rest of these are red. Well, if a point is fully constrained, in other words, it has two constraints, it physically cannot move unless the point that it's constrained to moves, then that's good. If it's got a yellow, then that means it's got a free constraint somewhere. So if something were to move on one of the, like if I were to move this whole template, you see that it's not holding its rigidity. That slope is not staying. Whereas if I move this template, you notice that the whole thing moves together. That's because everything is rigid. Red points means it's rigid. And the yellow point means it has one free constraint. If it's green, it has no constraints on it at all. It's free to move. And one of the rules of thumb that we sort of preach in the ECSO office is that you should only have one green point per template. Even if it's something like this, you can always still do an add constraint, full constraint, and constrain it to a center line or a median point. It doesn't matter. The main line is you're going to probably trigger this on and off based on something else. But if you were to have this being controlled by some horizontal and vertical control, you want the whole thing to move with it, meaning all your null points, all your end condition searches, everything should move relative to where your baseline is. So that's why even these added end conditions that you're going to trigger on and drop into place, they should also be constrained. Of course, this one should have that constraint put back on it from there. And it also should have a label on there, which is this slope out, just like it started with. So now if you move, obviously if you move this point, it's going to move relative to this point and everything stays rigid. Okay, I'm just about out of time. I did want to bring up this last slide, which was the top 10 things, if I can get it to display here. And that is best practices. You should always have a project template library in your project folder, and with SS3 it should be named according to your project number, and then it will automatically launch when you're in that project. Always use the template library organizer to copy FDOT templates into your project template library, because you just want to start with those. I didn't really get into this, but you want to organize your templates just like I organized them in folders. Within your folder for your corridor, you might want to have separate templates or separate folders for each corridor. Let's say you're working on a busy ramp and or a busy interchange. You wouldn't want to have all your templates in one folder. You might want to break them up and do like a ramps folder, a mainline folder, a side road folder, even surface template folder, so on and so forth. So organize them that way. You want to version your templates as you build them. Basically, as you add more and more things to it, what I would do is I would copy them and rename it like underbar 1, underbar 2, something like that. Or what I've found people do is they'll work on a template for a range and then basically name the template the station range that they're going to use that template for, and then they'll copy the template, make the changes necessary for the next station range, and then rename that same template for the next range. For example, it might be ramp A station 10 to station 15, and then you know at 15 you're going to add some guardrail, so you would copy your template and then call it station, ramp A, station 15 to station 18, and then add the guardrail components to it. And that way you know when you go into the template drops dialog that you're going to drop it within that range, and that's the template that you're going to use to drop it. Seeing that works really good for organizing on projects, complex projects. Obviously, make sure you're using the apply affixes. When building new templates, that's under tools options, and also make sure you're using the dynamic settings, because that's what you can that's how you can visually see if you're adding the affixes or not. It only takes 1 or 2 projects where you have a left underbar, right underbar, and then the point name to where you realized, oh darn, I wasn't paying attention to my apply affixes. Or the first time you get a zipper corridor, and a lot of you are laughing, but you know what I'm talking about. The first time you see a corridor that zips back and forth like a zipper, you're going to know that you have the same point name or point name override on either side of your template. And that's because you weren't paying attention or using the affixes when you created your template, when you were dragging in things. 1 green point per template as a rule. And I'm not going to tell you any rule otherwise at this point. I know people that don't use them, but I don't follow this and they get away with it, but they're usually more sophisticated. So when you start out with template design, make sure you have 1 green point per template. Make sure you have component name overrides, except you remove component name overrides except on common tie downs. And this should really be for component points, which is really the next point. So you just want to make sure that you don't have any of those overrides on for your backbone points. Same for points and components. Use the same label on common constraints. That's what I was showing, like so that you can change the pavement depth all at the same time, or who knows what else. But anything that you know you want to have common, make sure you have a common label on it. And then the last thing is make sure you have a good parent-child relationship organized in your active template folder. That's just going to make life easier for finding things and making things turn on and off. And it's easier for somebody to read your template if you organize it that way. That way you can see what is supposed to work with what, and so on and so forth. So I appreciate your attendance. Thank you all for your attention. Hope you learned something. Have a great day.